Good evening. My name is Ambassador Andrew Bremberg, and I am the President and CEO of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. Thank you for joining us here this evening. I would also like to thank our friends and partners at the Hillsdale College Kirby Center for welcoming us this evening indoors, given the inclement weather here in Washington, where we are able to still hold this important candlelight vigil in front of the memorial to the victims of communism. Tiananmen means gates of the heavenly palace, but it was on this day 32 years ago that those heavenly gates witnessed the wholesale slaughter of countless people by their own government. For the free world, 1989 is remembered as the year of miracles, where the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union began to crumble. But in China, it showed the brutal lengths the Chinese Communist Party was willing to go, slaughtering its own citizens to preserve its own power. What was the crime these brave Chinese citizens committed? Demanding that their government allow them the freedoms we in the free world take for granted every day: a free press, government accountability, and genuine representation. We are still living in the aftermath of that fateful night in June 1989. And it is for this reason that we still commemorate this appalling tragedy today. We also commemorate those who suffered countless acts of violence carried out across China that day in places where there were no journalists to record and bring to light the atrocities committed in the name of communism. Tonight, we stand in solidarity with the millions across China who were impacted by that event and continue to suffer in silence at the hands of the all-encompassing power of the regime. We also stand in solidarity with the people of Hong Kong, who until recently were the only people in all of China who could commemorate this day's events free from state repression. In 1989, more than 1 million Hong Kongers marched in solidarity with the protests in Tiananmen Square, and since then have mourned those that lost their lives during an annual vigil at Victoria Park. But this will be the first year that no such vigil will take place, now that the CCP has stuffed out any dissent to their one-party rule. Finally, we stand in solidarity with the millions suffering across China today, from the Uyghur, Kazakh, Kyrgyz, and Takish people who are being subjected to the CCP's genocide, to those suffering in Tibet, to the countless millions who desire basic human dignity, and to the people of Taiwan, whose freedom is being threatened every day. As we hold this ceremony, remember that any mention of the massacre will be erased in the country where it happened. That is why it is so important to hold this ceremony and honor those who educate the future generations about what took place. Few have been as important in carrying on the spirit of those days than the Tiananmen mothers. This group of mothers who educate the public about what their children experienced and demand nothing but transparency and accountability from their government are examples of how regular citizens can have a major impact. For the regime in Beijing, the Tiananmen mothers represent an existential threat to their totalitarian rule. To us, they are an inspiration, and it is for this reason that we awarded them our Truman-Reagan Medal of Freedom. Thank you for standing with us tonight to light a candle for those who are the victims of the most brutal communist regime on the face of the earth today. We will continue to hold this ceremony every year until the day comes when the Tiananmen Square Massacre is commemorated where it happened and its victims are given justice. I would like to now turn the podium over to Dr. Lee Edwards, the founder and chairman emeritus of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. Dr. Edwards.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Ladies and gentlemen, behind me you will see the replica of the goddess of democracy, which was erected in Tiananmen Square and then brutally destroyed by the tanks on June 4th, 1989. And I would like to share with you that when we were beginning to plan and design the Victims of Communism Memorial here in Washington, D.C., we said, what icon should we use? Should it be the Berlin Wall? Should it be a boat talking about those who were trying to come out of Vietnam and Cuba? Would it be possible to have the killing fields of Cambodia? And we debated this long and hard. And we decided that the most appropriate icon, the most appropriate symbol, was to do a replica of the goddess of democracy. For two reasons. Number one, because it is, after all, a representation of democracy, of freedom. But at the same time, it reminds us that this is a threat to the dictatorial regime of China, and that the first thing that they wanted to do was to destroy it. So this gives us both, if you will, the yin and the yang of communism. And we thank you so much for being with us this evening. Let me say one final thing, and that is, I know when you look at where we are today, and we look at the regime which still prevails there in China, perhaps we might get a little bit discouraged, or wonder, well, how much longer is this going to be going on? I always draw strength myself from the fact that in January of 1989, the communist boss of East Germany, Erich Honecker, said, pointing to the Berlin Wall, that this wall will last for 100 years. That was in January of 1989. In November of that same year, the wall came down. I am confident, as I stand here with you all, with our comrades in solidarity, that the day is coming when the tyrants and the totalitarians of China will be gone, and the people of China will be a free China once again. It's now my honor and privilege to introduce Jianli Yang, one of the champions, Jianli, one of the champions of freedom, one of the young men, he's still young as far as I'm concerned, one of the young men who has always been there standing tall, standing strong for the cause of freedom and democracy. And he's going to favor us with a few remarks here this evening. Jianli, please.
Thank you, Dr. V. Edwards, for your kind introduction. Thank you, Ambassador Bremberg, and your wonderful team for putting together another Candlelight Vigil for Tiananmen. Tonight, we gather once again as one family to remember our brothers and sisters who lost their lives during the Tiananmen Massacre 32 years ago. We come from different backgrounds. Our individual stories are unique, but we share the same calling and commitment. 32 years have passed. Despite the passage of time, this page of history has yet to be turned because justice has never been served. On the contrary, the Chinese government continues to commit atrocity after atrocity, largely with impunity. The same regime that slaughtered students in the street of Beijing is now engaged in countless other acts of oppression. Its victims include Hong Kongers, Uyghurs, Tibetans, Mongolians, Christians, Falun Gong practitioners, as well as journalists, independent intellectuals, lawyers, private entrepreneurs, and human rights activists. Under the tyrannical CCP regime, human rights violations in China today are at an all-time high. Even in my darkest moment on the morning of June 4th, 1989, when I witnessed tanks rolling over students, I never would have imagined that the CCP's tyrannical oppression would continue unabated some 3 decades later. As survivors, we commemorate Tiananmen Massacre, not only as a memorial for the victims, but more importantly, as a recognition of the continued struggle in China today. Fighting for freedom and justice is like the tank man standing in front of the convoy of tanks. It takes unparalleled courage and sacrifice. This is a time for us to test our underlying values and beliefs and to reconnect what we say we believe with what we do. It is deeper than just getting together, brighter than the candles we are holding. Justice must be served. This is our shared calling and commitment. As American writer E.B. White once wrote, as long as there's one upright man, as long as there's one compassionate woman, the contagion may spread, and the sin is not desolate. Hope is the thing that is left to us in bad time. I shall get up Sunday morning and wind the clock as a contribution to order and steadfastness. Tonight, we hold a candlelight vigil. Tomorrow morning, we will wind our clocks and begin another day in our fight for freedom and justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Jianli. Now I'd like to invite Sean Lin to come to the podium. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Lin. I'm with the Falun Dafa Association in Washington, D.C. It's my honor to be invited here to share my testimony as a survivor for the Tiananmen Square Massacre. It's unbelievable, 32 years has passed, and those memories still haunt you. When it happened, I was just a freshman. I was a student in Zhejiang University, and I went to Beijing to join the protest on May 30th, 1989. And I was on the square on the evening of June 3rd until I withdrew together with the last group of students on the dawn of June 4th. Even when we departed from the square, we already heard the gunshot. The bullet hits the monument. You can clearly hear the sound. It's still, the night still dark, and you feel the whole square just feel of the fear and horror. Feel the military is marching in. And when we left the square, when we headed north, in one of the street junctions, I was with a group of students. One of the young students, male, he was very close to the junction, and then tanks passing by. The student was so scared, he fell down on the street. The tank stopped, intentionally rolled back, curved, rolled back, and crashed his skull. All the students there, we were petrified. We can't believe this happened. We don't know how to respond to this. Very fortunately, the tank did not continue its killing. It rolled away. No soldier came out to shoot at us. And then finally we were able to come closer to look at the students. And we saw his skull just like a piece of paper on the ground. It's totally crashed. We were so scared, we ran away. those horrible memories can never leave you. And until today, I have no idea who the young student is, what's his name. He's probably from the Tsinghua University, because I was with a group of students from Tsinghua, because I don't know who he is. And probably his parents don't know how he died. And when we went back to the Tsinghua University, some of my friends there told me their class lost 1/3 of the students just overnight. The massacre was so brutal, nobody can ever forget it if they witness it. And I also want to highlight that the second half of the year of the massacres was also as dark as the massacre, because all the Chinese people were forced to choose whether they are told the party line, whether they choose to follow the lies that the Communist Party spread to the whole country, to the whole world. I remember when I back to Zhejiang University for the second half of the year, there was one period of time, every other day I had to go to the party secretary's office in my department, because they will interrogate you. They will try to ask, what did you witness? I had to lie in order to survive the college life. I had to tell them I didn't go to the Tiananmen Square. But fortunately, I did wrote what I witnessed, and I actually mailed it to my classmate before I left Beijing. So those memories never left you. And I feel Chinese people suffer so much, not just because of the massacres. The mental suppression that CCP enacted to torture the whole country, it changed the whole generation. My peers, my young fellows together, for the next 3 years after the 1989, before we graduate, nobody talked about anything about politics in China. We lost hope about any reform in China. We didn't think there's any hope. A lot of us, we just think, let's go out of China. Let's try to get a graduate school to study abroad. We lost hope in China. We didn't want to see any change in China. So that's a lost generation. And I feel this is what Chinese communists want. They want to control people's mind. They want to take your spirit away. And these still continue even today. And probably you heard recently in China, there's a popular term called laydownism, right? The young people do not want to be progressive. They do not want to be pursuing good careers. They just want to have minimum spending, don't want to buy a house, don't even want a marriage. They just want the minimum because they don't have any hope. They couldn't bear the burden for marriage, raising the kids. But I feel even in our generation, we are the earlier laid down because we give up the political hope for China. And Chinese Communist Party want the Chinese people just like slaves for them. You follow Communist Party, whatever they tell you. And we can see in the last few decades, so many persecutions, crackdown against so many different religious groups, so many different group of Chinese people in different professions. And it still happens today. And sometimes my friend will ask me, why they persecute you? Why they persecute the lawyers? Why they persecute Falun? Why they persecute so many Uyghurs? Well, my answer is very straightforward. That's the nature of the Communist Party. They are just like a parasite for the Chinese society. They are the demon possess the Chinese society, and they want to control people's spirit. Killing your body is just part of it. They want to change your mind. They want to take your spirit away. So, to end my speech, I want to give a little bit positive note. Is that so many Chinese people still have the courage. In the last few decades, many people still resist the Chinese Communist Party suppression. And what I'm very familiar is for Falun Gong practitioners, for 20 years, millions of Falun Gong practitioners still continue to spread the truth about the evil nature of the Communist Party in China every day. Many people did not give up. Many of the human rights activists in China did not give up. Even the young people choose a very passive resistance for laid on ism. They did not totally give up. And I think Chinese people still have the courage in their heart. They still have a chance to defy the Communist Party's dictatorship. They have the courage, and we just need to let them see the truth. And I believe the truth will prevail. And that's what we need to do every day. We don't have to choose passive. We need to be active. We need to actively spreading the truth inside China. Let more people know what the evil actions the Communist Party has done to Chinese people. And people in the world need to get together. We need to share the calamity that communism brought to the whole world. We need to unite together, and then we will see the ending of the communists in our lifetime. I believe so, and I believe so many Chinese people in China hope so. Thank you very much to let me share my testimony today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Cheng Guangcheng to come to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so sad now, so I just want to say, in territories occupied by the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP never stopped using violence to suppress the people. For 32 years, the CCP used the West high-tech and big data to develop its surveillance of facial and movement recognition systems. It is armed to the teeth to suppress those who have awakened and demand democracy. And it has successfully infiltrated and corroded other democratic countries. So look at what the coronavirus has done. It is many times worse than Pearl Harbor. If the democratic countries continue to make deals with the devil, the CCP, the enemy of humanity, not only will there be no hope for democracy, human rights, rule of law in China, but the future of American democracy will also be destroyed as well. So, democratic nations must give up their policies of appeasement and to stand with Chinese people to hold the CCP to account. These things are urgent. The time for change has come. The time is now to act. We must not just wait. Let's join hands together to throw the evil CCP into the trash heap of humanity. Thank you. Of history. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This concludes our speakers this evening, and now we would like to invite all of you and all of you gathered here to join us in a moment of silence. So I know we've got lighters out there. We will light the candles and we will have our moment of silence. Dr. Edwards, would you like to join me here?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Now I'd like to ask all of you to join us in a moment of silence. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Good night.